Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have a confession in the beginning, which is this is the shortest podium I ever stand behind. So thanks for the organizers that they consider my height. The other confession maybe I should start with is the intimate relationship between me and the definition of sustainability, the old definition of sustainability since the 70s, which is meeting the needs, the current needs, without compromising the future generation ability to meet their needs. And this is the mantra and this is the maxim that wake me up every day to continue working in sustainability, not only for myself, but also for my daughter, Sarah, 4 years old. So that is actually what really drives me hard. Today I would like to talk with you a little bit macro. We've been talking micro for a day and a half now about companies. I would like to talk about GCC generally. And what really inspired me to talk about GCC is when last year everybody were crazy about the future and the visions, the new visions like 2030 visions and Dubai vision and all visions in the GCC countries. The question was why we need this vision. And I asked myself this question as a sustainability professional to know exactly what is the context that this vision has to come in. To do that, what I did is I went back to the 5 years before that event and I analyzed the most important economic, social, and environmental KPIs, just to have a look and to see how we did before in GCC countries, so we need this next leap or this kind of change. I'll start with the economy, and you can see here that this is the GDP per capita on the left of the presentation, and the benchmark is Norway here. And in every slide you'll find a kind of benchmark just as a guide. And you can see that we have a fairly good GDP per capita, but in the other graph at the right, which is the real GDP, which means it's the GDP adjusted by inflation, is showing that there is a decline for the 5 years before 2016. And this is a trigger of thinking if we need to go back and see how our GDP should perform year after year. And to understand that, also we need to look at the inflation. And you can see on the left, the inflation rate of GCC, where even before what's really considered subjectively a healthy inflation rate. Okay, so this is something we need also to look at, and we need also to correct. But to correct that, also we need to understand the right side of the presentation, which is the GDP mix of the GCC countries. And we can find that oil dominating the mix of our GDP, and that definitely is not a healthy thing. Even if you see in Saudi Arabia there is 45% non-oil, it still is oil-related, like petrochemicals and fertilizers. So still in a way, an oil GDP-driven income. So to make the picture more clear, we need also to look at the export and import. And I put here on the top left the net export, which is export minus import. And you can see that we are very vulnerable as GCC countries to all the changes will happen in the commodity globally. So that will make GCC in a situation that, again, vulnerable and need really external help. And having said that, you also need to look to the other graph at the bottom, which showing the quality of port infrastructure. And in GCC, we have fairly good quality of port. And this is reported by World Bank. But unfortunately, it's not reflected in the way we are exporting or in the net export of us. And to understand both charts, I also put on the right hand side the ease of doing business. And you can see the rank. By the way, this rank has been changed in 2016, and I didn't consider 2016 because it's a very special year. But before that, you can say that our rank in ease of making or doing business in GCC, we were not really doing well. I know that the United Emirates now jumped to, I think, 21st or better. Saudi Arabia also jumped in the last year, but still comparing to what we really need, there is a struggle, and there's something we need to do to better the ease of making business in GCC countries. Those are some of the economic KPIs that we need to have a look. Let me show you something about the social. In this slide, all the four graphs are showing or telling one insight, which is GCC countries are fairly happy and content nations. And this is a very good news. But the point is, we need to capitalize on this. So the GCC countries are in the top 50 countries, happy countries. The Human Development Index of GCC countries is not that bad for the majority of them. The health rates are really high and good, and comparing to even to some benchmarks, outside benchmarks, the literacy rate in female and male are also high. So all these four KPIs telling us one thing, that GCC nations are happy and in a good position. The question is how we can capitalize on this. But this slide is showing a different story. It's showing the red flag, if I may call it. You have the increasing population. By the way, the average population growth is around, I think, 1.2, while we have 2 to 4 and maybe to 8% population growth. And majority of them, 70% of them are young, less than 30 years old. We have also the percentage of female versus male is something worth to look at again and to think of. And we have also a fairly, not fairly, but let me say, worth looking at unemployment rate that we need to address. And finally, the migrant workforce that we have in GCC is something also we need to look. I don't want anyone to jump to a conclusion that I'm suggesting that we need to have more regulations on migrant workforce. Actually, what I'm saying is almost the opposite. What I'm saying is, from all these four charts, it's clearly telling us that the GCC countries and the policymaker in GCC countries have to think about the social model again as GCC nations. We need to be open about this, and we need to think again about our social models. What is the best for our futures? And instead of doing what they call a social trade, like you give and get, maybe we need to think of a more interactive and integrative social model with the current social fabric that we have. And this is something has to be on the table of policymakers and has to be a deep discussion, and we have to move forward from just having a social trait. Now I want to go to the ecology, to the environment, and on the left you can see the deficit between the biocapacity of GCC countries. We are mostly desert, that's true, and in some of the studies they consider desert like zero biocapacity, but that is not true. The desert is still, it has a capacity, a biocapacity in itself. And here you can see that there is a deficit, a very big deficit between our footprint, environmental footprint or ecological footprint, and also the ability of the land to replenish itself, which is the biocapacity. Now, the question in front of the policymakers is, can we reduce our footprint? Definitely the answer is yes. By how much? That will be limited. Can we increase the biocapacity of our land? This is a good question, because no is not an answer. Yes is very limited answer, so we need to think again about how we can have this balance. And before I put my suggestion forward for you how we can make this balance, I want you also to see the CO2 emission that we are really exceeding and making some high records in CO2 emissions. again, within our context. And finally, you can see at the bottom also the water, the fresh water that we in GCC countries have. We don't have a wealth of water, so this is something the policymaker has to think about. And by the way, there is another graph that I didn't put it here, still in the report in my blog, anyone can download it, which show the withdrawal of fresh water of some of our countries in GCC. It's even more than per capita in countries like Norway. And this is something really interesting. So putting all these three charts in front of you, what I'm trying to say here is we need to think about our ecology in a different way, because if we cannot increase the biocapacity of our land, and if we want to go forward, we need also to increase our carbon our footprint generally. That is a consequence. Then we need to think in a different way. And the best thing to think of is to look around us, especially that we have a very fertile water bases around us in the Middle East, that we can tap into their resources, but in a very integrative, again, and a very nexus way instead of just trade. And this is what I'm thinking of. And I think the GCC policymakers have a very tough and difficult decision to take in economy, in social, and also in ecology. And the only way forward is to be interdependent with countries and with regions around us that they have, which we don't have, and we have what they don't have, basically. Talking about GCC, that is a macro. I want to take you finally to MAA'DEN, and again, thinking in the same way, having the three circles of economy, social, and environment. This is how in MAA'DEN we envisage our sustainability model from being endorsed and accepted internationally as a company with sustainable practices. Also in health, safety, environment, we want to move from performance-based to cultural-based, and in social, we want to be a welcomed neighbor and enabled surrounding. And finally, in economy and resources impact, we need to have a very optimized way of doing and handling our resources. I hope that my presentation is not is a little bit exciting, and I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for giving me this chance.